I would encourage every single young person to consider the impact of resiliency and the attitude that you never give up. And if you focus on being relentlessly pleasant with an abundance of grit, you are going to be stunningly successful.
What was being planned and put into motion was important. Again, I think having the workshops that we were able to experience in terms of those kinds of changes was helpful. Questions could be asked, and we could see the big picture, not just our little corner of the world, but the big picture for the district as a whole. It allowed us to see how those pieces were going to, kind of like a puzzle, how they were going to fit together. And having been at Miller Park as a teacher prior to the deseg plan, it was a predominantly African-American neighborhood. And I could see where it would be beneficial for the different groups to get together and get to know one another and build relationships. And so I could see the value to that. That was my experience.
So there was an unfair burden on some young people, predominantly at that time we were using the term African American. Today we'd probably say Black. But our young people who were from the near north side, who happened to be African American or Black, whichever term you're more comfortable with, those young people were getting transported much more frequently than our white children from West Omaha. And that's unfair.
During that time of mandatory busing, the district had it set up so really you only sent to one school and received from one school. And Crestridge, like Dundee, again, kind of being in the same east-west zone, sent to Conestoga and received from Franklin.
Well, you know, it wasn't unknown for them to leave their neighborhood. My own children experienced that a few years later into the DSEG program when they were bused from Dodge to Lothrop School. So it was a long bus ride. And I remember my youngest daughter mentioned the frustrating part for her with busing was in the winter when it was cold and there was snow on the ground, and she didn't think that the heating on the buses worked very well. She was a third grader that was bused to Lothrop, and she developed a friendship with a girl by the name of Erica. And Erica had been invited to spend the evening at our home. I think it was in January. And she came with her suitcase. And I helped her dad with directions on how to get to our home. In fact, I think I met him at the nearby grocery store and helped him find our house because he was coming from the other part of town. But before Erica arrived, Marie said to me, "Mom, we have to go shopping." And I said, "Sure, what is it that we need to get?" And she goes, "Well, I don't have any black Barbie dolls, and I want Erica to feel welcome in our home." And so, of course, that made sense. And when Erica arrived with her little suitcase, she opened it up and she had a little box of candy to give to us as a thank you for being a hostess gift. But that was the beginning of their friendship. And after that year at Lothrop, when they were third graders, they never physically were in the same school again. Marie came back to Dodge and Erica went to a different school. But they stayed in touch over those years. And she ran into her physically again, I think at Central High School when they were recruiting students for high school, and Marie ran into her there again. And of course, nice to see her again. But all these years later, my daughter is close to 40. They're still friends on Facebook.
We had had many, many suburban families because of their ignorance, their lack of understanding, and I'm just going to say it, racism, leave the school district. And Millard was like a little village. It was nothing. Okay. And all of our families, 20,000 plus OPS families, moved out to Millard.
I do know that there were some, but I wouldn't, their haven would have been St. Bernard's as a Catholic school, which had a tuition. So there was a, an impediment to that. We did see people who literally moved, they moved to Millard.
We definitely had parents on both ends that opted out. They either took their child to a different school or moved out of the neighborhood.
That's what matters, is that there's parity in what kids have access to. Because I'm not going to learn more if I go to a school and sit next to you, ReNae. Sitting in an integrated school doesn't make me smarter.
Yeah.
You sitting in an integrated school doesn't make you smarter. What makes us more capable is if I have the same access to the same quality science labs, reading labs, quality teachers. Mrs. Guardiola is one of the best teachers I had on my entire staff. And if you've got a teacher like that, wow, you're going to learn. But if you're in a school that doesn't have resources or is run down, so it was very important to us to have as much money go into all schools, not just West Omaha schools. So every school had the same curriculum, the same textbooks, etc.
I would say for the most part, they were very professional. First of all, they were really good teachers like you, and they were very inclusive. And so I think we all knew this was the right thing, or something was the right thing to do. We were definitely segregated. It's because you had asked me earlier. So I had originally taught at Kellam for 6 years, and I had one white student the whole time I taught at Kellam. Mm-hmm. So it was very obvious. Plus I think it was profoundly obvious that the resources of the district, I would say computers, but it wasn't computers back then. But I taught at Kellam with boarded up windows almost all the time because we had a lot of vandalism, but they were never replaced. So you didn't ever see that in the schools out west. And of course, you didn't have a very active PTA generally. So whatever was your resource, you were your own resource. So I think I just saw it from my bones, that this really needed to be done. That wouldn't have been the case with a lot of other people who had taught out west and never had an experience north. So, and at that point, it wasn't people who were experiencing things south. It was not really the same there. It grew more Hispanic and whatever, and disproportionate as the years went on. But back then, that wasn't the case. South Omaha was just pretty white at that point. We didn't have, in the beginning, there was not the necessary hello, meet and greet thing. Mm-hmm. Although our parents were offered, a bus ride to see Druid Hill, tour it. Rod Warlow was the principal then. He gave them a tour, reassured them of the physical facility and whatever. On the other hand, the parents, on the night or day that we offered the parents from Druid Hill to come see us, I don't think I got more than 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. But I can assure you that from then on, when there were discipline issues, phone calls made to the Druid Hill respective parents were ugly. They were, I never wanted this for my child. You're not treating them fairly. I should have known this from the beginning. It was really, really hard that first year to mesh it all together. And I had parents who protested, white parents, second grade parents, who protested every single day, the whole year, and came up, with signs. And
we had parents on both ends of the busing that were reluctant to send their children out of the neighborhood, both ends. And I, as a parent, could relate to that. That's far away. I'm not familiar with that school or those people. The other parents, my child's coming home with names of kids I don't know.
Initially, when I was given the school assignment paper and told that I was going to be bused as far away from my house as possible, I was really confused. I was like, why? There were only a handful of us from my neighborhood that were sent down there. And it was a very low income neighborhood. And predominantly it was African American. And we got sent down to Bryan High School, which at the time was predominantly Caucasian. There were quite a bit of Hispanics, but I mean, it was predominantly white at that time. But it was very strange. We didn't understand why. We didn't know. And it's a long bus ride. So, I mean, we were traveling by bus over an hour every day to school and then another hour from school. And that's when the weather was good. For me personally, it was not a positive experience at all. I was taken away from most of my friends and put in a school that was a really long ways away, where I didn't know anybody, and most of those kids had already like made their group of friends and came up through the same elementary schools and came together. They were allowed to do all these things together after school and things in the neighborhood, which of course I wasn't a part of. So for me, there were those of us that were bussed in together, that were kind of together, and then those that weren't. My first day when I got to Bryan, I was called into the principal's office. And apparently, because they used to keep records, everything was on paper. It was not on the computer. Okay. So my record apparently hadn't got there yet. They knew my name was Nichole Kriegler. They knew where I lived and they knew the area I lived. Okay. So I got called to the principal's office and they told me that I wasn't Nichole Kriegler. I was like, yes, I am. And they told me that the area that I came from, they had assumed that I was African American. So they were telling me that I didn't belong because I didn't match what they thought they were getting from my area.
The logistics of busing and getting that many students on buses is challenging, but worthwhile, in my opinion. I would do it all again because I saw so many friendships, and still do to this day, of kids that got to know each other that never would have known each other if it weren't for that, if it weren't for them being integrated in that way.